We were in I Hate Myself, and we were in Burn Man, and then most recently in Hoffman. John was in Gun Mall, and we were in
a lot of bands. Fist Fuck.
Yeah, that's right.
Kay Shipley. There were a lot of joke bands for a while in Gainesville. There's a band a month kind of thing. Jim just didn't have the fervor to be in illegitimate projects. So.
Played drums briefly for Hollow Paw, right?
Oh yeah, I played in Hollow Paw for 2 practices, and did I do a show? I don't think I did a show. I was also in Swayze for a show or 2 in my indie rock days.
Oh, and you had a band called who was it with James and Kristen?
Oh yeah, Worry Ship? Yeah. Clearly, I was too. Yeah, I spent too much time playing with random people. I would pretty much play with anyone that asked me to play with. So.
Well, sonic hedonism.
Yeah, pretty much. Absolutely. Yeah.
So then initially, like, can you guys recall your first exposure to like more obscure music, or not that what everyone was listening to?
That 7-inch, the Radon and the Spoke 7-inch that you brought home from high school, I think.
Yeah, sure, like underground type music. John had some friends in high school that were into the Butthole Surfers, I think.
Right, Donnie, yeah.
Rembrandt Pussy Horse was probably
on the wrong speed.
The edgiest record I think we'd heard at that point, except for Two Life Crew. Maybe that was a little bit more controversial than the Butthole Surfers. But so I think that was the start of it, right? And then you had a bass player friend in jazz band,
right?
Misfits,
yeah.
But then, folder.
Yeah, someone in high school gave you the Spoken Radon 7-inches, which were like 2 local No Idea bands. Yeah. And then our friend Aaron from our first band, Pung, worked at a place called Dairy Isle with this guy Rob and this guy Kevin. And Kevin made us a mixtape that had a bunch of random stuff on it, like Ed Hall and Bastro and the Pixies and Arc Welder, I think maybe Big Black. Just a lot of random interesting things, and Mishnah Burma and Afghan Wigs and stuff. And I think that's what kind of... And then we started just going...
Sure, that Afghan Wigs was not...
Afghan Wigs was Archers of Loaf?
Archers of Loaf was not...
Afghan Wigs may have been on the Short, Fast, and Loud Rhino tape comps that I would buy at Media Play.
I don't know.
Anyway.
But Brujeria was on.
Brujeria was on, yeah, they were fantastic.
At the wrong speed.
And what drew you guys to that sound? Beyond that, it was just something that was different. Like, was there something specific that you enjoyed from it?
I think it was different because I was a huge Primus fan in high school. Like, I just liked shitty, weird music, and I didn't really have much tolerance for what was considered, radio popular stuff. That the early '90s would have been, Vanilla Ice and that kind of shit. But yeah, I think I just liked interesting stuff. And also, we were both instrumental. I mean, Jim played trumpet and I played trombone, and so we were both in band, and so we were both practiced musicians. So I gravitated more towards interesting, intricate type musicianship, and I was a bass player too. So I thought Primus was awesome because they had a really complex bass player.
That's quite.
And then when we discovered sort of the community and the more simpler sort of like old school style punk or pop punk or indie or whatever you want to call it that Radon and Spoke did, then that sort of changed my perception of it didn't need to be fast and complicated. It could be slow and interesting or whatever. But that's why I liked it.
Yeah, I think I think we were at that age, when you're trying to sort of like create your identity or whatever, and I think we both like music a lot, and I did like the radio music, but I think like the alternative radio music was coming. It was still like top 40 radio stuff, but that was when Nirvana and I liked Pearl Jam quite a bit, that first album, and I think it was just you're trying to like go farther into like the unheard or whatever, and so your ear and your eyes are really keen to just anything that's a little bit different, and so I think that's part of the draw, and the other part of the draw is that it sounded really good, it doesn't it just sounded good. And then when I was introduced to like the local music or the local punk music, because there was a band called Horculture that we'd already like.
Horculture, Grinch, and Super Bowl.
Yeah,
Would
Grinch
play
was
shows,
a metal
cover Dish
band.
like every other month.
Yeah, and so I think we already like, I don't know. So when in high school we were introduced finally to like the punk niche in Gainesville. It was just another interesting, fun thing to explore.
Sure.
That's a long answer.
No, that's fine. In retrospect, like going into the Unheard Sounds, do you find that did it provide more belonging or isolating you guys more? Like were you able to find friends who?
I mean, not in our school, but I think definitely in the community. Because I mean, Gainesville in the, we're talking 92, 93, had a pretty thriving music scene. And most of it revolved around this place called the Hardback and the Cover Dish to an extent. And so when Jim and I played our first show at the Hardback with the horrible band whose name we won't even mention, I think Spoke happened to play with us.
It was called Spooge.
Okay,
There's
never
a
Jim will
band
mention
called
it.
Spooge.
Yeah. Spoke was there and they had played and we ended up meeting some folks and we played a couple more shows when Punk started at the Hardback. What do you
You
need?
okay?
Is it in the car? Did you leave it? Did I leave it in the car? Are you sure I left it in the car? Okay.
We're easy. If you
It's
need
in the
I was just making
cup
sure
holder
you
in the
left
front seat. So yeah, in my high school, because I went to sort of a nerdy magnet program high school. There was only that one guy that was a grade or two older than me that was playing bass and jazz band that was into the Misfits and stuff. There were really not any folks in my class that were into more. I mean, there was one guy that liked the Jesus and Mary chain, but that's to the extent that it got interesting or independent. So it was mostly just being exposed to the community, going out to shows and starting to watch shows and then play shows and getting to meet people and then going to house shows. And that's when it really started making more sense, like seeing what other people were doing as far as the music that they were playing and what they were listening to. That the exposure was exponential at that point in time. So.
As far as isolating ourselves, I mean, I think we were sort of like finding our own identities, like everybody does at that age, and I do think it opened up access to like a new community that was really very friendly and welcoming, despite being in college while we were still in high school.
I mean, it was one of those weird things where we were the young kids at a lot of this. Not the youngest, but we were definitely younger kids when we were in high school going to shows, and there were definitely people that were either in college or left college and finished college that were still like, hey, it wasn't weird for them to come up and say, hey, your band's not absolutely terrible. There's potential there. You should come to this show, the Utility House. There's shows there, and there's this other house that I shows, and you should come to this show and stuff. So it was pretty remarkable how supportive a lot of the older folks were.
I don't remember that many invites early on, but
Eric Carlson.
but I remember, seeing
Eric.
Flyers for places, and Eric was pretty nice, and Kevin and Rob had their finger.
I mean,
on the
that
pulse.
VAR was always really supportive too when we were in high school still.
Yeah,
so.
that's true.
Okay, then. Was there any like chip on your shoulder or something to prove feeling young? I mean, it sounds like it was fairly inclusive, but was there ever any like, we need to prove these older dudes that we can fit in?
I didn't
know
have
about
anything.
that.
I mean, there was some
I
level
knew
of
that
jealousy.
we weren't proving.
Because
ourselves.
we were pretty awful.
I think we were pretty if we were unliked, we were probably pretty oblivious to it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
I always felt pretty welcome everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there was a level of jealousy. I mean, I remember when the Hot Water Music guys moved to town. I was jealous that they were so good at their instruments, and they were suddenly popular. But that's the extent of which, like,
And I think there was a big misunderstanding on our part that you didn't have to know how to play your instrument, and so maybe they did say really horrible things about us. When we couldn't hear, but I give them credit for not saying it to our faces. That was probably really nice of them. But I thought that, and that was one of the draws is we weren't good musicians, and we thought, we can play music and not have to know how to play music. Early on, actually not just early on, but
we
years
pretty
later.
much maintained a lack of ability to play music for quite a while. Yeah.
So let's talk like the first formation of a band. what that was? Pong?
For us,
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I went
After
back.
Spooge?
Well, Spooge was our first band that actually played shows. Jim just sang, and I played bass. And it was a high school, what you'd expect from in 1992. I mean, it sounded exactly like
Had
Soundgarden. And
pretty long hair.
Jim had long hair, Prince Valiant style hair. And that lasted until we got kicked out because we were told by the 23-year-old guitarist that we weren't into it enough and we weren't willing to drop everything and go tour or some dumb shit like that. And then Pung started shortly thereafter. And that's, Jim's friend Aaron since elementary school that's when I started playing drums and he played bass. And then that lasted for a number of years. And then that turned into just band after band after band. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pung was our first real band and that would have been 1992, 93 maybe.
I think it was.
It was fall. Our first show when we played that Halloween show at Sam's house, Sam Jones' house.
Oh, yeah.
It was the fall of '93, October of '93.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. About the initial reception. Like,
Oh, we were
Everybody
fucking
was
terrible.
really nice.
Yeah,
I
they were
don't
nice,
think
but
anybody
yeah.
was really
No, I
excited
mean-
about the music. I don't know.
It started off. I couldn't play drums at all. Jim was a decent guitar player. Aaron had never played bass. Jim refused
I
to
was
sing.
I wasn't a decent
Jim sang through a flanger pedal because he didn't like the way his voice sounded by itself.
I remember that now.
And Alan at the Hardback gave us a show because I think he felt bad for us. We gave him a tape of songs we'd recorded at Kevin.
He was quite nice. He would let us
Yeah.
play on Wednesday nights.
The industrial night. Yeah.
Like, they didn't really open or start till 11, and then we would usually play last.
Yeah, somehow. And
Be
while we were
around
in high school, and our parents were
1
very
o'clock or
understanding. Yeah,
something.
we played like 1 o'clock.
And no one was there at the beginning, and no one was there at the end.
Yeah. I mean, Danarchy was
the
there. The door
out-of-town
guy.
bands that played with us were probably pretty bummed. that
Yeah,
we
they were
didn't-
real pissed
that
off.
we didn't draw
Yeah,
any audience.
yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe should we revisit that? I feel like you asked what the reception was. So it was.
yeah, just
It was-
did
it was-
People were quite nice to us, as people, like, in a social, what would you call it? A social segment,
Yeah.
of Gainesville. But I don't think anybody was really excited about it.
No,
nor should they have been.
No one was
It
coming
was
to our
really
shows.
bad.
No,
It
we
was
were
really
not popular.
Danarchy was very nice.
Yeah, Danarchy was very nice and supportive. And there were a few friends that would just come to shows, but most people go into shows just because there was a show happening.
Yeah.
We were not ever in bands that would be considered popular by any means whatsoever while they were around. So, I mean,
Nor should they have been. I mean,
No.
we were really bad. We were really bad musicians.
When do you feel that changed?
We had bad equipment and we were really bad
like
musicians.
the perception there. When do
well,
you feel-
Pat Hughes told me in Birdman, he said, "Oh, you finally learned how to kind of play drums." So somewhere around Birdman, then when I did Gunwall stuff, we practiced way too much. I think I got better at it. I mean, Jim's always exceeded me from a talent perspective on his instrument. So he figured out how to play far before I figured out how to play.
I would disagree.
Uh,
We were never very good. We were never very disciplined.
No, we didn't practice. If we had a show, we'd practice the day before the show, and we'd play the show. And maybe that's why no one came, because we really were not good live. I mean, we were not consistent. There were probably some shows where it was actually pretty great. I think often there were shows where it actually were really
doubt
good.
it.
But I hate myself, and Birdman and Pung know there were never any shows where the crowd was probably like, "Oh my God, that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen." So we didn't deserve an audience. So the best bands never have an audience, right? So,
But I mean, it speaks to the inclusivity of, or is it inclusiveness of
Sure.
Gainesville that we were allowed to even be there? Yeah. I don't think that sort of thing would happen now. You have to. It seems like you have to. Either you have to know how to play your instrument to play out, or everybody just knows how to play their
and there's some level of expectation that you have to have some level of competency that did not exist when we started. And we didn't book shows really. People would just ask us to play shows every now and then.
I went to the Hardback often and looked at
For
the
Pung,
calendar.
but not for I Hate Myself.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't play a lot of shows.
Yeah, we
No.
didn't. No.
Yeah.
So
And so as much as like music and forming bands is part of like formation of identity coming
Yeah,
of age,
yeah.
you guys still, from what I gather, still make music, whether it's without an audience or still
yeah,
interested
I
in
mean,
music.
yes.
So
yeah,
what is the
absolutely.
relevance of that outlet to this day, and maybe that was still there when you were a young man?
I mean, it's just some creative expression. It's not like, there have been, on my part, some limited attempts to do something that would garner some level of popularity. But I learned very quickly that was a fool's errand. But yeah, it's something to do. you know, that was very important to us for a majority of our lives at this point in time now. So I don't go to see shows that often anymore, but there's not as many shows in Gainesville anymore, and I'm not part of the whether for good or bad, not part of the sort of the youthful group of people that have house shows and stuff anymore. But I still listen to, and whether it's, you know, by myself or whatever, make music just because, yeah, it's something I've always done, and I think there's the expectation that I will always do it. I don't think I'll ever be in a shitty bar rock cover band. You know, I'm sure it'll always be something that I have some level of ownership of. But yeah, I mean, it's just always been there. I mean, even when we were younger, before punk rock stuff, I was playing music, playing trombone in orchestra and stuff like that. So.
What was the question?
Do you still do it, and why?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes. But it's just a private.
Jim is very personally prolific. Yes,
I am, but I'm not though. I at the time, I mean, that's a complicated question. Why anybody plays music, right? But when you're a kid, you just play music because you like. Someone who likes to listen to music, given the opportunity to play music, might play music, and I think that's what we were doing. And as you get older, it just turns into something different, you know. And when you're younger, I feel like playing music in public is kind of an automatic thing. Like, we're in a band, let's play music in public. And when it's not your job, it doesn't seem like there's a reason to play it in public. Unless you really feel like you have a good idea that you want people to hear, or you feel like you want to have a communal experience with an audience, but I don't feel that
Jim has no. Yeah, I still enjoy that. Jim, I don't think enjoys.
But I like to think about music, and I like to. I just have a hard time. Thinking that it's relevant to anybody but me.
And then, let's see. So, why I want to talk a little bit about. I was talking to you about this prior. Mm-hmm. We spoke to, like, do you know Indian Summer?
Yeah, of course.
We spoke to those guys.
I mean, I don't know them.
Right. But there's seems to be a sense of, and I don't think embarrassment's the right word, but feelings about the things they've created while they were young. And I want, I hate myself. Has a lot of things that could be perceived in many different ways. I want to know what your guys' thoughts on that, especially garnering.
I feel like you're tiptoeing around something.
I'm not embarrassed by it, but I think Jim absolutely is. Yeah.
But when you look at all your guys' projects, for some reason or another, that one has garnered a ton of popularity over the last few years, and I
don't know about a ton, but I will say of all the of the few bands. That one maybe has the most notoriety, and it may just be because of the name, I have a feeling had it been called Spooge, no one would have been as interested in it. I don't know, maybe. I don't know.
I think I assess more value of it than Jim does personally, because I wasn't responsible for really the majority of the creative output. I mean, I just played the drums, so I'm a little bit embarrassed. I don't think there should be anything to be embarrassed about with that band. I think there's really good stuff there, lyrically and musically and stuff. Performance-wise, yeah, we were fucking atrocious, and we should absolutely be embarrassed.
I think of all the embarrassments, that's one of the biggest ones. Is I never. Every time we played a show, I was like, okay, this time, it'll feel good, and it just never felt good.
I mean, our last song of our last show, we played this. The last show I hate myself ever played was at the CMC, the Civic Media Center here in town, and I think our last song we played was Kamikaze, which was on that 12-hour turn split, and it's one of my favorite songs to this day. I still think it's an absolutely beautiful, brilliant song. We just hadn't figured out. I hadn't figured out the drum part yet, and so I was unsure of what I was supposed to be playing. And so the very last song we played, I mean, it ended appropriately because I fucked up the end of the very last song we ever played as a band. And that was just kind of like, that just is exemplary of how we were as a band. It never really sit right. And that's why I still to this day say, like, can we just let's just play one more show. And I've unfortunately somehow negotiated Jim into agreeing to do it on a couple occasions, and it still never works out because it just never
each
sounds
time,
right.
You would think like after a number of years it would get better. And
Yeah.
just every time.
Every time we do it, there's some reason it just doesn't work out right. So.
What? Who was that show with?
Was it Roy Ploy?
Did we play with Hickey?
It might have been Hickey or Roy. I don't know. It was a weird band that sounded nothing like us, and we shouldn't have been on that show in the first place. But it was fun.
I will say, I'm embarrassed that that we were bad musicians. I'm embarrassed that it's captured on tape. I'm not embarrassed of the name as much because it wasn't like a super serious. Like we weren't. We didn't really take it that seriously. You know, it wasn't a huge joke, but we didn't take it seriously. And a number of the themes and songs, I think, weren't meant to be taken really that seriously, although I wouldn't say that they were jokes. But some of the songs I still like, and I wish that we had recorded them a little bit better, but not many of them. The only thing I'm embarrassed about with the name is I can't tell people, like adults, the name.
But he's totally comfortable telling people he's in a band called Spooge. But I hate myself. No, he's not.
I feel ridiculous telling grown adults and children. I can't tell anybody the name of the band.
What's the degree of embarrassment that you feel? Like you said something that you wish they were never recorded. Would you have rather, I hate myself, never have been a band in the first place?
Oh, no, because the important thing to me was, the experience with friends and family, I just wish that I'd put more thought into it. I think the start of our experiences in punk rock, our experience in punk rock was you can play punk rock without having to know how to play an instrument. And I think every band after that kind of suffered because we never really learned how to play.
We started playing shows as punk right after we'd written songs. Like we would just be like, okay, we've got 6 songs, let's go play a show now. And it was atrocious. It was fun. We had a blast.
And our equipment was really bad. Like now, nobody has bad equipment. No. But back then, you had no idea what you were supposed to play through. Everybody had PVs and heavy metal guitars or whatever. Yeah. And any pedal that said distortion on it or something, and now everybody they start with like an immaculate sound, and it just wasn't that. Anyway, everything was an afterthought to we're just going to be in a band and make songs.
Yeah. We toured a little bit. We didn't tour a ton, but they were fun for the most part. Not as much for me as they were for Jim and everybody else on the tour, but
and that's the thing is like the only way tour was fun is if you were like blasted or whatever, and that's a ridiculous way to. So
I'd argue that right now in music, there's a lot of very safe music and highly produced music, and very clean music, and I'd argue that there's charisma that comes from something that sounds a little more organic.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think Jim's doing, to an extent, the music a disservice because the bands that I hold the most dear don't sound perfect either. Some of the early Wire stuff or Mission of Burma stuff.
There's a spectrum of imperfection.
Well, that's true. We were definitely on the far end of like, God, this is almost unlistenable because of the fact of their limited ability to perform. But a lot of those the original bands, the recordings weren't good and the songs weren't played perfectly. We took it to another level of lack of perfection. But again, that's just the way it's going to be. I'm highly embarrassed about. It's hard to listen to some of those records because there are some horrible drum fills on them that make no sense. But then even the last record we did, which I think is a brilliant record, there's still horrible drum fills on it. So I had to let go of the fact that my terrible performances were going to at all temper my thoughts or opinion of the work as a whole.
Oh yeah, and I don't want to suggest that when I'm saying we were all bad musicians, I'm speaking for John. I'm mostly speaking for myself. He wasn't a bad musician, and Steve was actually
the most accomplished.
I feel bad for him that every when we would travel, every night he had to sit there and listen to us try to learn to play our instruments.
Yeah, Steve was actually a really accomplished guitar player when we asked him to join the band. When he asked him to play bass, phenomenal metal guitar player. And so, yes, of the 3 of us, he was far more. And that's why he stood behind the speakers every time we played. If there was a PA there,
I don't know
Oh, there was.
I think he was happy.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I don't regret it. I mean, I'm embarrassed by my own parts, but I think as the band as a whole, I'm proud of it. I think it was awesome. I think there's some brilliant songs there. There's some ridiculous songs, but I think the brilliant songs far outweigh the ridiculous songs.
I feel like we've answered whatever question prompted that. Yes.
While playing music, what was the expectation for life? Like, what were you guys going to school for? What were you guys expecting to be in a band the rest of your life, or like what was the same?
No, there was, at least on my part, there was probably some level of like, gosh, that would be nice, but there was never any expectation that I would be a professional musician. Clearly, I didn't care enough to practice, so, and I'm not an idiot. I knew that you had to at least be somewhat good to be professional. And now that's not necessarily the case, but no, we just went to college, to get a degree. I went to school for physics.
Yeah, I went to school. Originally, I was going to be a marine biologist, and then I changed it to English. But I thought I was going to play music forever, and I thought that I would work a job that kept me alive while I played music forever. I didn't think music would be my career because I didn't think, like, I had that idea, like, authentic music wasn't a career, but, and there was that idea back then that, like being a sellout was a huge big deal. When Jawbreaker was on Geffen, it was a huge deal, which speaks to really simpler times. Like, nobody would care about that now because everything's falling apart. But that was a big deal, and so I thought I would be.
Did you guys learn anything that applies to this day from being in so many acts, making mistakes even? Were there any lessons that you learned from that time?
For musicians?
Yeah, life. Just in general.
I mean, there is some level of humility that's learned by being in an embarrassing. I mean, I have numerous embarrassing performances. I just had to learn to get over it. It helped me. I was a fairly shy kid, and so that being able to overcome some level of nervousness and just not worrying what people thought about it. I think definitely that's something that to this day, for better or for worse, is still contributes to my personality. I probably should care a little bit more about what people think, I guess, than I do. But yeah, I mean, that's, and that just the importance of community. I mean, the thing that bothers me the most now, the thing that I regret the most, the fact that I've lost touch with a lot of people that we, were really close to and friends with back then. And I don't see those people nearly enough. And even the people that still live in town, I don't see nearly enough. So, but I still absolutely value that idea of a sense of community. I just, wish it maintained for a little bit longer.
I don't know that I learned anything. I don't know. I mean, maybe I would have to think about it more and get back to you. I do think I really regret. When I got into it, and part of it is just being a kid and idealizing a lot of things. I thought there was this massive, positive energy for change in the punk rock movement or whatever, or at least my small experience with it, and I feel like it didn't live up to its promise. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on it, but at the same time, I didn't do anything to contribute to any positive change myself. I was probably just trying to have a good time most of the time. I think I thought, like, eventually I'd do something good, but